Wolves of Maple Hollows, The Unexpected Blizzard. The Wolves of Maple Hollows, The Unexpected Blizzard. Published date December 14th, 2021. Independently published by Michael W. Brill with co-authors Blaze Peichel and Noel Peichel. Copyright 2021. All rights reserved. It was first light on midwinter's day. The sun could barely be seen peeking through the trees and heavy clouds along the edge of Maple Hollow's mountains. Sisters Noelle and Amelia were finishing their breakfast in the dining room while their cousins Blaze and Alexandra were putting on their snow pants in the breezeway. "I can't find my skates," announced Alexandra. Blaze was almost done putting on his snow boots for the trip down to the Maple Hollows pond. "You left your skates on the porch from the last time you went skating," said Grandma. "Everyone's skates are on the porch." "Hurry up and finish eating," said Alexandra to her cousins. Amelia finished her breakfast and went into the living room to find the family dog, Scooby. He was in there sleeping on Grandpa's chair. He was snoring very loudly, but woke to the sound of Amelia walking into the room. He gave a big yawn like most dogs do and then jumped down off the chair, stretching it as he came down. "Come on, Scooby, come on," said Amelia in a very polite and sweet voice. Scooby was wagging his tail very happily. Amelia called out, "Grandma!" She then entered the kitchen where everyone was gathered. "Is Scooby coming down to the Maple Hollows pond to play with us on the ice and in the snow?" Blaze answered Amelia before Grandma could say a word. "Of course he's coming. He is the one that pulls us onto the ice when we hold his leash. This time I want to try it with him pulling me on my sled." "That sounds like it is going to be lots of fun," said Grandma. She then took a look at the clock on the wall. She then said, "Grandpa is still not back from the grocery store. I'm gonna have to leave him a note to let him know that we're down at the Maple Hollows pond again." As she was saying this, she was looking out the window and noticing that it was starting to softly snow. Grandma, Blaze, Amelia, Noelle, and Alexandra all set off with Scooby, making their way down the very snow-filled trail that leads to the frozen Maple Hollows pond. Everyone had their skates in their hands. Blaze was pulling his sled as Scooby ran alongside the trail, jumping in the falling snow as he went. Noelle had her scarf wrapped around her neck and mouth was with just a bit of her lips peeking out. "Brr, it sure is cold and cloudy day today," said Noelle. As they arrived at the pond, they all sat on the boat dock in a place where Grandpa had shoveled off the snow several days earlier. Everyone had put on their skates except Blaze. He wanted to leave his skates off, hoping that he would have a better ride in his bright orange sled, as Scooby pulled him. A loud thump sound could be heard off in the distance. It almost sounded like someone dropping something very heavy on the ice. "What was that sound?" asked Alexandra. "It is just the ice settling, dear," said Grandma. "That is what happens from time to time with frozen ponds and lakes. No worries." Grandma and the three girls started skating as soon as everyone had their skates on their feet. The snow was starting to come down heavily, and it was beginning to accumulate on the ice rink. Grandpa had made snow piles all along the edges when he formed the shape of their ice skating rink on the frozen pond. "To stay inside the shoveled area," said Grandma to everyone. The snow was starting to cover the ice. Blaze was getting the leash and rope ready so that he tied to his sled. He sat in the sled and shouted at Scooby to go. Scooby began running onto the ice, pulling Blaze behind him in the sled. Scooby pulled Blaze very fast. He almost ran into Grandma as he reached the far end of the ice skating rink. "Stop! Stop!" Blaze shouted at Scooby to stop, but he plowed right through the snowbank on the far end of the ice rink, pulling Blaze along. Grandma stopped skating and just started shouting at Scooby to stop. He just kept on going and Blaze was getting scared. The girls at this point all reached the edge of the ice rink where Grandma was standing, and all of them shouted for Scooby to stop. Blaze found himself grasping hard to the sled and rope, holding on for dear life. Scooby ran through the snow, pulling Blaze and the sled behind him to the other side of Maple Hollow's pond. He came to the other edge of the embankment and could go no further. "Scooby, I told you to stop!" exclaimed Blaze with a very frustrated look of disappointment on his face. "Now we have to go back." Blaze looked back and could barely see Grandma and the three girls fall through the falling snow as they stood way on the other side of the frozen pond. Blaze took a moment to grab some snow and he lay down in his sled eating it as Scooby sat beside him. Scooby also took a chomp of snow into his mouth. Blaze was ignoring the cries and could barely hear Grandma and the girls as they were shouting for him. Several minutes later, several minutes went by, and then he noticed something strange. It was quiet. It was too quiet, he thought to himself. He sat for a moment in his sled, squinting through the snow in their direction. The snow was coming down very heavily now, and he could almost no longer see Grandma or the girls. He began to think to himself, "I can't see them. Where did they go?" Suddenly a great shiver of fear ran across his back as he saw 5 gray bodies that appeared to be running across the frozen pond. About halfway between him and where he last saw Grandma, it was the wolves. He immediately knew why Grandma and the girls got quiet. He knew Grandma and the girls were probably crouching down. He thought to himself, they had to be hiding from the wolves, crouched down on the other side of the snowbank at the edge of the ice rink. As Blaze was thinking this, Scooby caught the wolf scent and began to bark very loudly. Blaze aggressively whispered, "Be quiet, Scooby. They are going to hear you." As Blaze was trying to hold the rope and leash, Scooby began to pull away. He pulled Blaze and the sled right in the direction that the wolves appeared to go. Scooby was barking very loudly as he gave chase. Blaze fell face down in the sled while also holding the rope as he wanted to be pulled along. Scooby started to pull faster and faster. Blaze could no longer tell where he was on the frozen pond because the snow was coming down very heavily, and Scooby pulled him away from his return path. Scooby pulled Blaze on the ice for several minutes and then came to another edge of the frozen pond. This time he kept going, leaving the frozen pond behind him. He was not stopping, and he was clearly in pursuit of the wolves while pulling Blaze along in the sled. They went off the frozen pond into the deep Maple Hollow's woods. Scooby gave chase for about 5 more minutes and then suddenly stopped for no apparent reason. Blaze got up out of the sled and pulled Scooby towards him, struggling to see him through that falling snow. "Why did you do that? Now we are lost," Scooby sat panting. Blaze stood for a moment and whispered to Scooby, "I can't even call out to Grandma because the wolves will hear me, and they will come." It was about this time that Grandpa finally returned from the grocery store. He went into the house and put the groceries away and then found the note that Grandma left him. The note was sitting on the kitchen table where he would usually sit to have his coffee. The note read, "Gone skating with the kids again. Scooby too. We are down at the ice rink. See you around noon. I love you." Signed, Grandma and the kids. Grandpa thought to himself in a moment, "They have to be nuts to go skating in weather like this." What was Grandma thinking? As Grandpa was thinking, he glanced at the clock. It was about 10:30 in the morning, so he thought to himself, I have time for a nap." Grandpa went in the living room and sat in his chair. Moments later, the room gave way to a sound of chainsaw snoring as Grandpa was fast asleep. Bang! The outer door slammed open. The wind had blown it and made a very loud noise as it hit the porch railing. The sound woke Grandpa. He sat up. He sat up. The house was very quiet inside. The howling wind could be heard piercing the edges of house windows. Grandpa glanced at the clock. It was 3:30 p.m. "That can't be right. Did I sleep for that long? Why didn't she wake me up for lunch at noon?" he asked himself. He sat up and looked out the window and saw that all the snow was not letting up at all, and it appeared that a foot of snow had already accumulated. At this point he could hear children calling him from outside, and then he heard Grandma calling out for him. He knew something was wrong here, because Grandma had a certain tone as she yelled for him from the path that the girls approached the house. Grandpa jumped up and ran over to the door, grabbing his coat and shotgun. "What happened?" All the girls tried to explain, but Grandma demanded silence as he spoke. "Blaze is lost out there somewhere in the woods. We were at the ice rink and Scooby pulled him in his sled towards the woods while chasing some wolves. That was around 9:45 this morning. We went to the edge of the pond and walked all around trying to find where they went in the woods, but the snow was too deep to see anything. But now everyone is freezing. Blaze is still out there somewhere in the snow. Didn't you get my note? It's been several hours." As they were all walking to the house, Grandpa explained what happened to him. He said that he was thinking that they would have woken him up from his nap at noon. "Call the police," said Grandma to Grandpa. "I'm going looking for Blaze and Scooby. You all stay here and wait for the police and explain what happened. Tell them I'm headed for the pond when I get there, and I will go around the woods that surround the pond at about 100 feet from the shoreline, going in a clockwise direction. I have a whistle that I will keep blowing. Hopefully he will hear me, or the dog will hear me and will start barking." Knowing that the storm was not letting up and that it was going to be dark in a few hours made this a very dangerous situation for both Blaze and Scooby. Grandpa put a bunch of survival stuff into his backpack, including a tent, sleeping bags, water, and food. He also had a handheld two-way radio and extra shots for his shotgun. He gave one radio to Grandma and said to her, "We will use channel 3. Grandpa left down the path that was now covered in a foot of snow. He walked down to the frozen Maple Hollows pond. He immediately began to go around it just like he said he would. Grandma was on the phone for several minutes calling the police and then also neighbors to help in the search. When he was done calling, she went over and hugged the girls. They were all very worried and sad. Noelle said, "Grandma, can we pray? I'm scared." Grandma could see that the three girls were all very worried. "Yes, we can pray. That is the best thing we can do. Let's all hold hands and get on our knees." Grandma prayed with the girls for several minutes, with each taking a turn. Meanwhile, Blaze and Scooby sat in the same place. Blaze knew what his grandfather taught him. He remembered that Grandpa said, "If you do not know which direction to go, stay put." So Blaze used his sled to make a snow fort for both him and Scooby. He made walls of snow and then used the bright orange sled for a roof. They crawled inside and huddled close together. He left an opening the way Grandpa taught him to make a shelter, facing away from the blowing snow. "We are going to be in big trouble, Scooby," said Blaze to his dog. "It is going to be dark soon, and I'm freezing." Blaze tried to keep Scooby sitting still so that he could listen to anyone coming to help. He knew that Grandma would not leave him out here in the snow. He figured that they headed back to get help. Another hour went by and Blaze was shivering a bit more. Suddenly Scooby started barking very loudly and then he stopped. He acted like he heard something. "What is it, boy?" asked Blaze. As he was saying this, he could hear a faint whistle and the sound off in the distance. He immediately clinched Scooby's leash so that he would not run off. They both crawled out of his shelter and stood up. The screeching sound of the whistle was heard again, and Scooby started barking again. "That is Grandpa," explained Blaze. As Scooby barked, Blaze shouted very loudly in the direction of the whistle sound. "Grandpa! Grandpa!" Blaze could see Grandpa approaching. Grandpa shouted, "Blaze!" Scooby pulled Blaze along as he walked and held his leash. They reached and hugged Grandpa about 20 feet from the shelter that Blaze made. "I am glad to see that you are okay. It is getting dark and it is much colder now. I'm going to radio Grandma and let her know that I found you." Grandpa called on the radio. "Grandma, this is Grandpa. I found Blaze and Scooby. Over." The sound of very happy children could be heard by Blaze and Grandpa in the background of Grandma's return radio message. "We are all very glad you found them. Where are you? Is everyone okay? Over. We are about an eighth of a mile west of the pond by the Maple Hollows Creek Falls." "Over," said Grandpa. As he said this, Scooby started crouching down and growling, facing off into the darkening woods. At this point, a wolf appeared doing the same thing, but creeping towards them. Grandpa took his shotgun off his shoulder and pointed it into the air. He fired it with the huge sound of a bang! The wolf didn't even quiver from the sound. Scooby was barking uncontrollably towards the wolf. Grandpa then said to Blaze, "These wolves are hungry. They are not afraid of the sound of the shotgun this time. Stay close to me. I'm sure he's not alone." Everyone back at the house heard the shot. Grandma immediately called over the radio. "We heard the shot is everything, okay?" No response. She called again several times over the radio, but there was no response. Grandpa was keeping the gun pointed at the wolf. He knew that the wolf was going to try to separate the three of them so that the pack could pounce. "Open my backpack and take out the box of shells," said Grandpa to Blaze, as he kept the gun pointed at the wolf as he began to load several shells into the shotgun. Suddenly, all the rest of the wolves appeared. They were also crouching and growling at their intended victims. They surrounded Grandpa, Blaze, and Scooby. Grandpa began to speak to the wolves, shouting, "I did not want to shoot you. Go away!" As he said this, off in the distance, several dogs could be heard barking. It was their neighbors. They had all band together to search for Blaze, and they had finally arrived. It was about 20 people and 10 dogs. They were getting closer and closer, and the dogs were all barking very loudly. Wolves sensed a group as a danger. The wolves feared the approaching crowd and ran off. The leader wolf stayed and growled for a bit longer, but then ran off too. The wolves all ran deep into the Maple Hollows woods. Several minutes went by, and one lone wolf could be heard howling way off in the distance. Groups of men, women, and dogs surrounded Grandpa, Blaze, and Scooby. Everyone was cheering as Grandpa wrapped Blaze in a warm blanket that was also retrieved from his backpack. Grandpa picked up Blaze and carried him, leading the way toward home, with Scooby and the rest of the crowd following. Grandma was waiting at the door with Noelle, Amelia, Alexandra. They all made hot chocolate and cookies for the arriving survivors and a large group of rescuers that came to help. Grandpa grabbed Blaze and squeezed him. He would not let him go. She dried him off and got him into warm clothes. Noelle, Amelia, and Alexandra surrounded him and would not take their eyes off him. Scooby sat behind them on the floor, chewing his bone. Grandpa invited everyone inside. Everyone sat in a large circle in the living room, with all the kids and Scooby in the center. Grandpa looked at all his grandchildren with a big smile and said, "The whole thing reminds me of the story that Joshua told in the Bible. Though when one sheep is lost, he leaves all the rest of the sheep with others and goes into the wilderness looking for the lost sheep. When he finally finds the sheep, grabs it and rejoices and picks it up and carries it home. When he gets home, everyone gathers and rejoices because the lost sheep was found." Everyone was smiling and happy. Grandpa had told everyone what had happened with the wolves, stating that he arrived just in time and why he shot the gun. He said, "It was my friends and neighbors that drove away the wolves." Blaze was feeling very bad about what happened. He knew that a lot of people were there because of him. He said to them all, "I'm sorry, I could not stop Scooby. He chased the wolf pack by pulling me in the sled, and we got lost in the snow." Grandpa replied, "No one here is mad at you, Blaze. No one is mad at Scooby either. Everyone is extremely happy that you were found safe in this blizzard." Grandpa then turned to the crowd and thanked them all for coming. He then bowed his head and prayed out loud, saying how grateful he was that El Shaddai kept Blaze and Scooby safe from the wolves and the unexpected blizzard, all while they were lost deep in the Maple Hollows woods. The end.